What if everything you believed about your family, your legacy, and your place in the world was quietly erased overnight? Imagine waking up one morning to find that the system you were born into, the one that promised protection, prestige, and an identity that few in the world could claim, suddenly had drawn a line in the sand. That line now separates you from your children. That line now decides the futures of little Archie and baby Lilibet, without their consent, without your approval. For Harry and Meghan, this is no abstract question. It has become their reality, and it has shocked the world in a way few could have anticipated. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Within the first few seconds of hearing the news, there was disbelief, shock, confusion. How could this happen? How could King Charles, Harry's own father, make a decision that affects not just Harry and Meghan, but the very essence of their family? And why now, in this moment of transition and public scrutiny? The headlines screamed one version of the story, the tabloids another, and social media users flooded the web with hot takes and memes. Yet behind the flashing cameras and viral tweets, there is a truth far more intricate, far more personal, and far more dramatic than anyone expected. This story isn't just about protocol or monarchy. It's about legacy. It's about family. It's about power, control, and the quiet cruelty that tradition can impose on those who dare to walk away from it. Harry and Meghan made a choice, a highly publicized, often criticized choice, to step back from royal duties. They pursued independence. They wanted a life free from relentless scrutiny, from palace politics, from the unspoken rules that govern every moment of a royal's existence. And for many, that seemed like a fair trade, freedom over tradition. But what they may not have fully grasped, or perhaps underestimated, was that the monarchy, the institution, does not forgive easily. It does not bend to emotion or personal reasoning. And it certainly does not relinquish control of its lineage without consequences. Archie and Lilibet, innocent as they are now caught in this storm. They did not choose to be born into royalty, nor did they ask for the scrutiny that comes with the name they carry. Yet, the decision made in the corridors of Buckingham Palace now affects their very position in the line of succession. To the public, it might seem like a bureaucratic move, mere rearrangement on a list. But for Harry and Meghan, and for the children themselves, it is deeply personal. It touches on identity, belonging, and the fundamental question every parent faces. Can you protect your children from a world that refuses to leave them alone? The timing of this announcement is particularly poignant. King Charles has spent decades waiting for his moment. Years spent under public and private scrutiny, shaping an image that balances tradition with modernity, expectation with reality. His rise to the throne was long anticipated, yet fraught with tension, not only with the media, but with his own family. Charles is now king, and as king, he must navigate the tightrope of public perception, constitutional responsibility, and personal relationships. The decision to remove Archie and Lilibet from the line of succession is emblematic of that tightrope, a move that may protect the institution, yet wounds the heart of the family in ways few can see. But this isn't merely a story of personal heartbreak. It's a story about power and symbolism. Every action taken within the monarchy carries weight far beyond the individual. Every decision sends ripples across the nation, across the Commonwealth, and across the globe. When the heir to the throne makes a move affecting the children of his own son, it speaks to a tension older than anyone alive today. The tension between duty and love, between tradition and individuality, between institution and humanity. And it raises questions that echo far beyond the palace walls. What does it mean to be royal in the modern world? And how much of that identity is inherited versus earned? Social media, as expected, exploded. The news was dissected, debated, and sometimes distorted, but the underlying truth remained stark. The future of Archie and Lilibet, their place in the monarchy, and the privileges and protections that accompany it had been altered. Parents around the world sympathized. Critics weighed in with historical comparisons and legal arguments. But what most people missed is that this decision was not a snap reaction. It was the culmination of years of strategic moves, small decisions, and unspoken rules. It was the result of decades of observation, measurement, and careful consideration by those who guard the monarchy most fiercely. And for Harry and Meghan, this reality is a bitter pill. The system they challenged and sought to escape still exerts power over the very next generation. So why does this story matter now? Why should anyone care, beyond the celebrity drama that dominates headlines? Because it is a lesson in the intersection of legacy, privilege, and consequence. It is a vivid illustration of what happens when the personal meets the institutional, when individual choices collide with centuries of tradition. And it is a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about family, power, and justice in a world that often masks cruelty with ceremony. For Harry and Meghan, the emotional stakes are immense. This is not merely a public humiliation. It is, in many ways, an existential crisis for their family, for their children, and for themselves. Every parent wants to shield their child from harm. Every parent wants to see their children thrive, protected by both love and society. But when the society in question is steeped in centuries of hierarchy, rules, and precedent, protection becomes complicated. And when the one making the decision is your own parent, someone who loves you but must balance that love against duty, the complexity becomes agonizing. The tension in the royal family has been simmering for years. Harry's choices, from outspoken interviews to charitable endeavors, from public statements to private decisions, have continually tested the boundaries of what the monarchy can tolerate. Meghan's entrance into this world was itself a catalyst for change, controversy, and conversation. Together, they represent a challenge to the status quo, a new model of what it means to be royal and human at the same time. But every challenge carries a price, and the removal of their children from succession may be the highest price yet. And yet, the story is far from over. In fact, this is only the beginning of a saga filled with revelations, twists, and consequences that will ripple through the monarchy, the public, and Harry and Meghan's lives for years to come. Every detail matters. The timing, the legal nuances, the reactions behind closed doors. Every conversation, every interview, every whispered consultation in palace corridors adds to a narrative that is as complex as it is dramatic. The truth is hidden in the subtleties, in what is said and what is left unsaid, in the glances and silences that define royal life. So, as we begin this journey into one of the most explosive royal stories in recent memory, prepare to see beyond the headlines, beyond the soundbites, and beyond the public spectacle. We will examine the legal frameworks, the historical context, the emotional realities, and the public perceptions that intersect in this extraordinary moment. We will explore why Archie and Lilibet, mere children in the eyes of the world, are at the center of a story about power, heritage, and identity. And most importantly, we will uncover the personal toll that this decision has exacted on Harry and Meghan, a toll that the world rarely sees, and one that they feel deeply every single day. By the end of this video, you will not only understand what happened, you will feel why it matters. You will see the layers of tension, the heartbreak, the strategic calculations, and the emotional upheaval that accompany a decision that may forever alter the royal family's landscape. And you will realize, as Harry and Meghan surely have, that in a system where lineage dictates destiny, no choice is ever truly private, and no consequence is ever truly isolated. What if the line of succession, the very backbone of the monarchy, is not as simple as it seems? At first glance, it looks like a neat, ordered list. First the heir, then the heir's children, then the next in line. Straightforward, logical, almost comforting in its predictability. But beneath this polished surface lies a labyrinth of rules, traditions, and historical quirks that can twist a simple birthright into a precarious gamble. And for Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet, that labyrinth has suddenly become perilous in ways no one outside the palace walls could have imagined. The line of succession is more than a ceremonial list. It is a web of legal codes, historical statutes, and centuries-old customs that govern who is considered eligible to ascend the throne. At its core, it is an assertion of continuity, the monarchy's way of saying, no matter the turmoil outside, the line remains intact. Yet, what most people don't realize is that this line is also remarkably fragile. One misstep, one legal technicality, one breach of expectation, and the continuity is threatened, not just in theory, but in the lived experience of those born into it. Historically, succession was rigidly male-dominated. Sons came before daughters, and inheritance often skipped siblings in favor of male heirs. This all changed with the Succession to the Crown Act of 2013, which allowed absolute primogeniture, meaning the firstborn child inherits the throne regardless of gender. A step forward, or so it seemed. Even with this reform, the rules remain entangled with centuries of other requirements. Allegiance to the Church of England, the legality of marriages, the political environment of Parliament, and yes, even residency considerations. It is this tangled web that has ensnared Archie and Lilibet. On paper, they are royal grandchildren, born into privilege, and positioned to inherit a certain level of recognition and status. In reality, the rules governing their eligibility are far more nuanced, far more vulnerable to interpretation, and far more susceptible to strategic maneuvers by those in power. And here's the thing. The average person doesn't see these subtleties. They see a cute child, a royal baby, and they think, of course they will inherit their place. But the monarchy is not a playground. It is a chessboard, and every piece is both protected and expendable, depending on who is controlling the board. Consider the historical precedent. Throughout history, heirs have been removed, bypassed, or excluded for reasons ranging from religious conversion to scandal to political expediency. Some were stripped quietly, others publicly, their lives forever marked by the consequences. The key takeaway? Being born into royalty is not an automatic shield. Titles and privileges are conditional. They are granted, maintained, and, in extreme circumstances, revoked. And in the modern monarchy, where public perception matters as much as law, conditionality has expanded to include strategic considerations, media narratives, political optics, and familial loyalty. So why does this matter now? Why is the line of succession suddenly in flux for Harry and Meghan's children? The answer lies in a combination of timing, precedent, and perception. King Charles has ascended to the throne, and with that ascension comes a delicate balancing act. He must uphold tradition while modernizing the monarchy. He must manage public opinion while navigating family tensions, and he must maintain the legitimacy of the institution above all else. In this context, even small deviations from expected behavior can be amplified, scrutinized, and acted upon, sometimes with dramatic consequences. And that brings us to the subtle but crucial distinction: eligibility versus expectation. On paper, Archie and Lilibet may still exist in the line of succession, but expectation, both public and institutional, has shifted. When Meghan and Harry stepped back from royal duties, they effectively created a new dynamic. They became outsiders, operating with a degree of independence unheard of in modern royal history. For the institution, this independence is a signal. The traditional protections afforded to royal children may no longer fully apply. And that is where the legal and emotional collision occurs. From Harry's perspective, this is profoundly unsettling. He grew up within the palace system, a world where rules were both rigid and invisible, where privilege was a birthright, and where his place in history seemed assured. Yet he also learned the harsh realities of that world. Scrutiny is relentless, mistakes are unforgiving, and the system's loyalty is often conditional. Now, as a parent, he is confronting a reality that is both familiar and terrifying. The rules that governed him as a prince may now operate against his own children. Meghan's perspective adds another layer of complexity. As an outsider, she has always been acutely aware of the fragility of their family's position. She understands the optics, the politics, and the emotional toll of public judgment. Yet, even she may not have anticipated the full weight of how stepping outside royal expectations could ripple back to affect their children. What seems like a bold, liberating choice is simultaneously a high-stakes gamble. A gamble with consequences that extend beyond their own lives to the very existence of Archie and Lilibet's future in the monarchy. For the public, this is often obscured by the glamour and spectacle of royal life. A child born into royalty is automatically perceived as safe, insulated by history, ceremony, and love. But the monarchy is a living institution, not a fairy tale. It reacts, recalibrates, and protects itself first. And when a new king assumes the throne, as Charles has, recalibration is inevitable. That recalibration can be invisible, quiet, and shocking all at once, as it has been in this case. Consider, for example, the technicalities that govern succession. Allegiance to the Church of England, marital approvals, and public duty expectations. Each of these is a potential lever of influence. In the past, such mechanisms were rarely used against grandchildren who were so young, so publicly beloved. But the current climate, an institution balancing modernization and scrutiny, combined with a family that has deliberately stepped back, has made even these subtle levers potent instruments. One quiet decision, one nuanced legal interpretation, and the expected order of succession can shift dramatically. And that brings us to the most poignant point, the human cost. Archie and Lilibet, mere children in the eyes of the world, are caught in a maelstrom that is largely invisible to them. They do not yet understand the stakes, the rules, or the history. They will grow up with the weight of this moment hanging over them, regardless of how much love or protection their parents provide. For Harry and Meghan, this is an existential challenge. How do you parent in a system that can, at any moment, redefine your children's place in the world? How do you shield them from power structures that operate beyond your control? And yet, the story is far from static. Every decision in the monarchy is layered with history, consequence, and symbolism. The removal of Archie and Lilibet from the line of succession, whether formal, perceived, or procedural, cannot be understood in isolation. It is the culmination of decades of precedent, centuries of rules, and a lifetime of personal choices by those at the center of the royal family. It is a story that intertwines law and love, strategy and emotion, legacy and rebellion. So, as we begin to peel back the layers of this intricate saga, it is crucial to remember, the line of succession is not just a list of names. It is a reflection of history, a tool of power, and a source of profound emotional weight. What seems like a bureaucratic rearrangement is, in fact, a deeply human drama, played out in the corridors of palaces, the pages of law, and the hearts of parents and children alike. And what makes this all the more compelling and terrifying is the fact that the very system designed to protect royal children has, in this instance, become the mechanism through which their vulnerability is exposed. Every rule, every precedent, every nuance can be wielded as a sword or shield. And in this case, the sword has moved, quietly and decisively, toward the next generation. But the story does not end here. In fact, what comes next, behind closed doors, within private corridors, and through conversations that will never be broadcast, is where the true drama begins. Because when a royal parent becomes both a king and a father, the lines between duty and desire, love and obligation, protection and power, blur in ways that are impossible to ignore. It started with a whisper. At first, barely audible, a subtle note slipped into the morning papers. Archie and Lilibet's positions in the line of succession had been reconsidered. The words were carefully chosen, seemingly innocuous, almost bureaucratic. But in the digital age, whispers become roars in seconds. By mid-morning, social media was ablaze. Headlines flashed like wildfire, some screaming betrayal, others confusion, most sensationalizing what was, at first, a quiet administrative note. Royal shock. Harry and Meghan's children removed from succession. Palace reshuffles the next generation. Archie and Lilibet, cut from the line? The world paused, scrolled, and shared. Millions clicked, debated, and judged. Within hours, it was impossible to escape the story. Notifications pinged relentlessly. Tweets, posts, and videos dissected every word of the palace statement, or lack thereof. And in the eye of this storm were two parents who had long understood that stepping outside the monarchy came with costs, but who perhaps never fully realized the speed and ferocity with which the world could react. The initial confusion was almost surreal. Many readers assumed it was a misprint, a misunderstanding, a clickbait headline designed to attract attention. But as journalists dug deeper, cross-referenced legal documents, and consulted royal historians, the unsettling truth emerged. The monarchy had quietly taken steps that affected the children's future in ways few could have predicted. And while the palace remained tight-lipped, the ripple effects could not be contained. For Harry and Meghan, the moment was shattering. Imagine scrolling through your phone only to see the lives of your children being debated, dissected, and speculated upon by millions, while the very institution that once promised protection now appeared to have redefined their place in the world. The personal, the private, collided violently with the public, and the emotional toll was immediate: grief, anger, disbelief. This was not about headlines. It was about family, identity, and legacy. What made this moment particularly explosive was the discrepancy between perception and reality. On one hand, the public saw cute children, a celebrity couple, and a seemingly administrative adjustment. On the other hand, the palace and its legal advisors operated in a realm few could understand. A realm where even minor technicalities, birthright eligibility, residency, parental choices, could trigger seismic consequences. The headlines obscured the complexity, but the impact on Harry and Meghan was visceral, immediate, and profound. Social media magnified every reaction. Supporters rallied, decrying the move as cruel and unnecessary. Critics argued it was a logical step, a consequence of stepping back from royal duties. Influencers and news outlets debated endlessly, often amplifying misinformation in their rush to capitalize on the story. But amid the noise, one thing became painfully clear. Harry and Meghan were now navigating not just their own emotions, but the relentless judgment of a global audience, their children caught squarely in the middle. The palace's strategy, or silence, added another layer of drama. No official press release provided context. No statement explained the reasoning behind the decision. The absence of clarity created a vacuum, and humans instinctively filled it with speculation, rumor, and narrative. The longer the silence endured, the more intense the public reaction became. This was a lesson Harry and Meghan knew well. Perception often outweighs reality, and silence can speak louder than words. Within this chaos, media framing became a battlefield. Tabloids painted Harry and Meghan as reckless, accusing them of jeopardizing their children's place in history through independent choices. Broadsheets leaned toward constitutional explanations, attempting to contextualize the move in legal terms. Online commentary oscillated wildly between sympathy and outrage. And in every instance, the children, Archie and Lilibet, were reduced to symbols, innocent, vulnerable, yet politically significant. But the emotional toll of this moment cannot be understated. Harry, who grew up under the glare of relentless media scrutiny, now faced it from a different vantage point. As a father, witnessing his children's lives become fodder for public debate. Meghan, who understood the cruelty of headlines better than most, had to reconcile the safety and happiness of her children with the reality that the world would never see them as ordinary children. Every post, every viral story, every editorial was a reminder that stepping away from the monarchy did not equate to stepping out of its shadow. And yet, even in the midst of this chaos, the situation revealed something remarkable about the institution. Its control is subtle but absolute. The palace did not need to release a dramatic statement. It did not need to convene a press conference. The mere act of letting the news surface in a controlled, almost ambiguous way allowed the monarchy to assert its authority without overt action. This is the quiet power of the institution. Shaping narratives, controlling perception, and managing legacy, all while maintaining an appearance of impartiality. Historians quickly pointed out precedents for such moves, though none in recent memory had involved children so young or so publicly scrutinized. Traditionally, succession adjustments were made quietly, sometimes retroactively, and often shielded from public awareness. But the transparency, or lack thereof, of modern media ensures that such moves are now almost impossible to contain. And so the palace found itself navigating an entirely new challenge, balancing tradition with contemporary scrutiny, authority with public perception, and legality with emotion. For the public, this became a drama of numbers, titles, and bloodlines. For Harry and Meghan, it became an emotional reckoning. Every legal nuance, every precedent, every historical anecdote was now intertwined with personal pain. The line of succession, once a distant, almost abstract concept, became deeply intimate, profoundly human, and unbearably urgent. Their children's futures, previously abstract and taken for granted, were suddenly under threat in a way that could never be undone by simple explanation or media clarification. And the impact extended beyond the immediate family. Friends, advisors, and supporters of Harry and Meghan watched helplessly, understanding that no amount of advocacy could fully shield the children from the institutional mechanisms at play. Every conversation, every strategy meeting, every consideration of public reaction became intertwined with emotion, legal nuance, and political calculation. It was a balancing act that required precision, resilience, and an understanding that the public's gaze is unrelenting and often unforgiving. This moment also revealed the human contradictions within the monarchy itself. A system designed to protect lineage and preserve legacy is simultaneously capable of creating profound vulnerability. It is both shelter and storm, tradition and instrument, protection and threat. Harry and Meghan, who sought independence, now confronted the reality that independence comes with exposure, that stepping away from a system does not remove one from its consequences. And their children, innocent and unaware, became the embodiment of that paradox, symbols of both privilege and precarity. The headlines may fade, but the impact lingers. Every viral story, every social media debate, every news clip adds layers of complexity to the children's lives and to the family's emotional landscape. For Harry and Meghan, this moment is a reminder that choice and consequence are inseparable, that the desire for freedom comes with a price, and that even the most carefully considered decisions can be interpreted, misinterpreted, and weaponized in ways no parent could foresee. And amid the swirling narratives, one fact remains clear: this is not just a media story. It is a deeply human story about love, protection, loss, and legacy. It is about parents confronting a system that is larger than themselves, navigating a world that will judge, scrutinize, and debate their every move. And it is about children whose lives, futures, and identities are being shaped not by their own choices, but by the intersection of tradition, power, and public perception. They say that no one truly understands a parent's fear until they experience it firsthand. For Harry and Meghan, the news that their children, Archie and Lilibet, had been quietly removed, or at least sidelined, from the line of succession hit like a thunderclap. It wasn't just a legal or procedural matter. It was an emotional earthquake, shaking the foundation of their family, their identities, and the very world they had tried to build for themselves outside the monarchy. Imagine Harry's perspective. He grew up in the glare of cameras, paparazzi lenses, and a media that scrutinized every move he made. He learned early that privacy was a privilege rarely afforded to him, that mistakes were magnified into crises, and that affection could be measured in public perception rather than private reality. Yet, even with this experience, nothing could prepare him for the pain of watching the institution he was born into subtly, and perhaps irrevocably, reshape his children's futures. The line of succession, something that had always seemed abstract, had suddenly become intensely personal. Meghan's experience was different, but equally poignant. Coming from outside the royal system, she had always understood that their position was precarious. She knew the risks, the subtle pressures, and the ways the institution could assert control without appearing overtly authoritarian. But even she was stunned. The removal of her children from succession, or the reduction of their status, was more than an administrative act. It was a public signal that their family's independence came with consequences. And that signal, amplified by media frenzy, was a brutal emotional reality to absorb. Together, Harry and Meghan confronted an intense mixture of grief, anger, and helplessness. Grief for their children, whose innocence was being weighed against centuries of tradition. Anger at the system, which seemed unyielding, almost punitive. Helplessness, because no amount of influence, publicity, or explanation could immediately reverse the damage or soothe the emotional sting. Every phone call, every meeting with advisors, every whispered conversation became a battleground of emotion and strategy. One cannot underestimate the emotional stakes here. Parenting is inherently vulnerable, but parenting in the public eye, against the backdrop of a centuries-old institution, multiplies every worry exponentially. Every decision is scrutinized, every reaction amplified, and every feeling dissected. For Harry and Meghan, protecting their children from the fallout of this unprecedented situation became a mission fraught with uncertainty. How do you shield two young lives from an institution that is simultaneously protective, judgmental, and inescapably public? Historical context underscores the magnitude of their challenge. Royal children have been affected by institutional decisions before, but rarely in such a transparent and emotionally charged manner. Previous heirs have been bypassed due to scandal, political expediency, or legal technicalities, but rarely were young grandchildren of a reigning monarch caught in a moment so scrutinized by the global public. Harry and Meghan's situation is unique because it combines the personal, the procedural, and the public in a perfect storm of emotional intensity. The psychological toll was immediate. Sources close to the family reported that Harry retreated into a private space, grappling with feelings of helplessness and frustration. He understood the legal and constitutional logic behind the move, but comprehension offered little solace. Meghan, meanwhile, navigated a dual burden, supporting Harry emotionally while managing her own sense of outrage and worry. She faced the challenge of maintaining composure for public appearances while privately processing a sense of betrayal, not by strangers, but by a system and individuals she had once approached with trust. This emotional breaking point was also fueled by the stark contrast between past expectations and present reality. Harry had grown up with the implicit understanding that his children, like him, would inherit not just titles, but a network of protections, privileges, and a sense of belonging. Meghan, as an outsider, had hoped that the modernized, independent life they were building would allow them to raise their children free from institutional pressure. Yet both confronted a hard truth. The monarchy operates according to its own rules, rules that do not bend for personal desire or familial love. Even the seemingly small details contributed to the emotional weight. Public appearances, official communications, and ceremonial duties now carried a latent tension. Every reference to succession was loaded with subtext. Every media report was a reminder of a subtle, but significant, shift in their children's future. The pressure was relentless, both inside and outside the family. Emotional resilience was tested daily, and moments of private reflection were often tinged with anxiety and sorrow. There were, of course, moments of quiet determination amidst the heartbreak. Harry and Meghan are not passive actors in this story. They have always approached their lives with a sense of agency, a desire to challenge convention, and a commitment to protecting their family. Yet, even agency has limits when confronting centuries-old institutions. Their emotional breaking point was not about giving up. It was about realizing the magnitude of the forces arrayed against them and the lengths they would need to go to protect their children. This episode also revealed a striking contrast between public perception and private reality. To the outside world, Harry and Meghan had made a conscious choice to step back from royal duties, appearing confident, empowered, and in control. But the emotional reality was far more complex. Confidence can coexist with grief. Empowerment can exist alongside fear. Public composure can mask deep, personal turmoil. The headlines and social media commentary missed these nuances, focusing instead on the spectacle rather than the human dimension. Perhaps most harrowing was the awareness that their children would eventually understand. The realization that Archie and Lilibet, when older, would face questions, judgments, and curiosity about their altered place in the line of succession added an extra layer of emotional weight. Parenting is always forward-looking. It is always about anticipating challenges your children will face. In this instance, those challenges were compounded by public scrutiny, legal ambiguity, and institutional rigidity. The breaking point was not just emotional. It was anticipatory, a projection of grief into a future still being shaped. This chapter of their lives also illuminates a broader truth about privilege and vulnerability. Royalty, often imagined as insulated, is deeply vulnerable when personal agency conflicts with institutional expectations. Titles and protection can be granted and revoked. Security and privilege can be conditional. And love, no matter how strong, cannot shield one from the mechanisms of legacy, tradition, and power. Harry and Meghan's breaking point underscores this tension, revealing the paradox of their lives. immensely privileged yet profoundly exposed. Despite the emotional strain, Harry and Meghan's response was both deliberate and strategic. They understood that public reaction would influence palace calculations and broader perceptions. Their grief was therefore intertwined with planning. How to communicate, how to protect, how to navigate a world in which private anguish was inevitably public. Every emotional response was filtered through a lens of strategy, every tear weighed against potential implications. The human heart was negotiating with the political brain, and the resulting tension was palpable. The breaking point also emphasized the isolation that can accompany leadership, even within a family. Harry, once part of the inner circle of monarchy, now stood in an ambiguous space, both insider and outsider. Meghan, historically an outsider, had anticipated challenges but now faced the intensified reality of defending her family within a system that did not bend for love alone. Together, their experience illustrates a universal truth about power structures. Being inside the system does not guarantee protection, and stepping outside does not guarantee safety. And yet, the intensity of their emotional response underscores another truth. Love, for Harry and Meghan, is non-negotiable. Every decision, every confrontation, every strategic move is grounded in a desire to protect their children. Even in the midst of heartbreak, anger, and confusion, the parental instinct remains paramount. Their breaking point is not a surrender. It is a catalyst, a moment of recognition that will shape their next moves, their advocacy, and their commitment to their children's futures. And as the world watched, reacting with fascination, outrage, or sympathy, the private drama unfolded in parallel. Whispered conversations, late-night strategizing, and moments of quiet despair. The breaking point is not a single instant, but a continuum, a prolonged emotional reckoning with consequences both immediate and long-term. It is a testament to the pressures of navigating love and duty within a framework that is centuries old, globally scrutinized, and institutionally unyielding. It started with a decision that seemed, at the time, like liberation. Megxit, a term that would go down in modern royal history, was meant to be their declaration of independence, a choice to step away from the relentless spotlight, from the suffocating protocol, from a system that seemed to measure every heartbeat in public currency. For Harry and Meghan, it was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to build a family life on their own terms. And in many ways, it was exactly that. But as with all decisions that intersect with centuries-old institutions, the consequences rippled far beyond what they could anticipate, touching places they could not control, including the very future of their children. When they announced their intention to step back, it was more than a media event. It was a seismic shift in the royal order. It disrupted expectations, created uncertainty, and triggered debates that spanned continents. The headlines were immediate. Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties, royal family in turmoil, the monarchy's modern dilemma. Public reaction was swift and polarized. Some praised the couple for reclaiming autonomy, applauding their courage in challenging tradition. Others condemned them for stepping away, suggesting that their move was selfish, reckless, and potentially harmful to the monarchy's image. But behind the public spectacle, the personal stakes were monumental. Harry and Meghan were not just stepping away from duties. They were stepping away from protections, privileges, and a system that had long defined their lives. They were, in essence, rejecting a predetermined path, and with that rejection came immediate consequences. The HRH titles were at risk. Security provisions were under review. And most importantly, the perceived protections for their children, Archie and Lilibet, were no longer guaranteed. One of the most significant shifts came in the form of legal and procedural adjustments. Stepping back did not erase royal bloodlines, nor did it remove them from history books, but it did recalibrate the children's place within the institutional framework of the monarchy. The rules that once offered a measure of automatic protection and precedence now became conditional. And this is where the gravity of the decision truly hits. The move to independence, while empowering in personal terms, effectively placed their children in a liminal space, a place where privilege exists alongside vulnerability, and security is not guaranteed by tradition alone. The emotional impact of this reality cannot be overstated. For Harry, Stepping back meant confronting the fact that the world he had been born into, a world of heritage, expectation, and ceremonial identity, was now something he had chosen to leave behind. It was liberation, yes, but it was also loss. Every ceremony not attended, every duty delegated, and every public absence was a reminder of the gap between past expectation and present reality. Meghan, whose perspective had always been informed by the challenges of entering a rigid, centuries-old institution as an outsider, understood this well. She had anticipated scrutiny, criticism, and opposition. Yet even she may not have anticipated the speed and intensity with which stepping back would redefine not only their lives but the legal and social standing of their children. The concept of stepping back, in theory, sounds simple, but in practice, it is profoundly complex. The monarchy is not merely a family. It is an institution, a global symbol, and a political entity. To step away from such an entity is to challenge its structure while simultaneously exposing oneself to its mechanisms of control. For Harry and Meghan, this duality became apparent almost immediately. Their independence allowed freedom of action, financial autonomy, and personal privacy, but it also invited scrutiny, criticism, and procedural recalibration by the very system they had left. From the perspective of the monarchy, the move was unprecedented. Few members in recent history have attempted such a balancing act, retaining royal identity while seeking independence. The institution, while outwardly accommodating, also had to maintain continuity, legitimacy, and public trust. This meant creating boundaries, redefining expectations, and, when necessary, recalibrating succession considerations. The logic was clear from an institutional standpoint. Stepping back equals redefinition. But from a human, emotional standpoint, the consequences were anything but clear. Harry and Meghan were acutely aware of these dynamics. They understood that independence came with a cost, and they were prepared to bear it. Yet the full extent of that cost, particularly as it related to their children, was only beginning to reveal itself. Archie and Lilibet, who had been born into a world of privilege and public attention, were now navigating a new reality. One in which their place in the line of succession was questioned, where protection was conditional, and where their parents' choices had irrevocably altered the landscape of their early lives. The emotional complexity extended beyond titles and privileges. Stepping back also meant navigating relationships within the family. Harry's bond with his father, King Charles, was now tested by conflicting roles: parent versus monarch, son versus king, protector versus administrator. Every interaction was charged with dual expectations, each requiring negotiation, restraint, and emotional labor. Meghan, too, faced tension in navigating these relationships, balancing loyalty, advocacy, and the instinct to shield her children from harm. The private negotiations, rarely visible to the public, were as intense and fraught as the public spectacle itself. At the same time, stepping back exposed the family to unprecedented public scrutiny. Every decision, from philanthropic projects to media appearances, was interpreted through the lens of independence and rebellion. Public perception, as Harry and Meghan had long understood, wields a power comparable to law. It can affirm legitimacy, undermine credibility, or create controversy where none previously existed. And in this climate, the children's roles and futures became symbols in a broader narrative, rather than private matters of family and love. The repercussions of stepping back also extended to legal and constitutional considerations. Royal succession is not merely ceremonial. It is regulated by statutes, conventions, and historical precedent. By removing themselves from traditional duties, Harry and Meghan triggered subtle but significant recalibrations of how their children would be considered in these frameworks. These were not arbitrary changes, but deliberate adjustments to align with both the law and public expectations. And for the parents, witnessing the implications of these adjustments was both painful and galvanizing. Yet, amid the upheaval, Harry and Meghan also discovered a surprising dimension to their independence, agency. For the first time, they could make choices unconstrained by protocol, tradition, or expectation. They could craft public narratives, engage with media on their terms, and pursue philanthropic initiatives that reflected their values. However, This newfound agency came with the simultaneous recognition that freedom, in this context, is not absolute. It is bounded by the reality of family, legacy, and public perception. Every action carries both opportunity and consequence. Stepping back also created a new psychological landscape. The couple faced an ongoing negotiation between relief and regret, excitement and fear. Every step outside the institution offered a sense of liberation, yet also carried the weight of responsibility. Responsibility for their own lives, their public image, and most poignantly, the well-being of Archie and Lilibet. This emotional tension, oscillating between empowerment and anxiety, defined the period following their exit. The consequences of their decision were not only immediate but ongoing. The recalibration of succession, the scrutiny of media, and the private negotiations with family created a continuous feedback loop of tension and adjustment. Every public appearance was evaluated, every interview analyzed, every statement scrutinized, not merely for content, but for implication. And at the center of this loop were their children, whose innocence was juxtaposed against the relentless machinery of legacy and expectation. And so, the exit that was intended to grant freedom also ushered in a complex, emotionally charged, and unprecedented recalibration of family, institution, and future. Harry and Meghan's decision was bold, principled, and forward-looking, but it also revealed the fragility inherent in balancing independence with lineage. For the first time, they fully confronted the reality that stepping away does not insulate you from consequence. Rather, it redefines it in ways both predictable and unimaginable. Imagine the weight of expectation resting on your shoulders for decades. Every decision scrutinized, every move analyzed, every word dissected by historians, media, and family alike. For King Charles, the moment he ascended to the throne was the culmination of a lifetime under observation, a lifetime spent preparing, waiting, and navigating the treacherous waters of public opinion and family dynamics. Yet, even this lifelong preparation could not fully equip him for one of the most emotionally fraught challenges he would face as king, deciding the future of his son's children in the line of succession. Charles's position is a unique intersection of roles. He is a father, tasked with nurturing and protecting his children. He is a king, responsible for maintaining the continuity and legitimacy of a centuries-old institution. And he is a public figure, accountable not just to his family, but to millions of people across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. Each role carries obligations that often conflict. Each decision requires a delicate balance between love and duty, personal desire and institutional necessity, private emotion and public expectation. The stakes were especially high in the case of Archie and Lilibet. On one hand, Charles is a grandfather who undoubtedly loves his grandchildren deeply, with an instinct to protect them from harm, criticism, and pain. On the other hand, he is a monarch tasked with upholding tradition, precedent, and legal frameworks designed to preserve the monarchy. The subtlety of the situation lies in the fact that these two responsibilities, grandparent and king, can clash, sometimes violently. And in this instance, they did. To understand Charles's dilemma, one must first understand the monarchy's need for order. Every adjustment in succession, every public declaration, and every private arrangement carries long-term implications. Allowing exceptions, bending rules, or ignoring precedent could weaken the institution, invite public criticism, and create confusion for future generations. Yet, enforcing rules strictly can cause immediate pain, resentment, and familial rupture. Charles was now confronted with a situation where every choice carried risk, both personal and institutional. The emotional complexity of this position cannot be overstated. Charles, as a father, would be painfully aware of Harry and Meghan's perspective, the anger, the grief, the feeling of betrayal. He understands what it is like to be judged, to have your choices scrutinized, and to feel misunderstood by both family and public. Yet as a king, he is also responsible for the integrity of the monarchy, a responsibility that demands sometimes cold, calculated decisions. The human heart and the institutional mind were in tension, and Charles was forced to navigate this friction in real time. Public perception added another layer of pressure. The media had long portrayed Charles as a cautious, measured figure, a man weighed down by responsibility and expectation. Yet the announcement affecting Archie and Lilibet could be interpreted as harsh or unfeeling. Every statement, or lack thereof, was parsed for meaning. Every appearance was analyzed for emotion, hesitation, or subtle cues. The public's gaze intensified the stakes, transforming a private family decision into a global spectacle. In private, Charles's advisors likely presented the decision as logical, consistent, and in line with both tradition and precedent. But even the most rational explanation does little to resolve emotional turmoil. The monarch must reconcile the human consequences with the institutional benefits. In this case, the calculus was complex. Protecting the monarchy meant taking actions that could wound the family. Protecting the family risked undermining the institution. This impossible tension defined Charles's position. Historically, kings have faced similar conflicts. Monarchs have had to balance love and duty, personal relationships, and political necessity. What makes Charles's situation unique is the unprecedented combination of modern media, public scrutiny, and the independence of his son and daughter-in-law. Harry and Meghan are not passive actors. They are vocal, visible, and influential, and their decisions challenge the monarchy in ways previous generations could not have imagined. Charles had to navigate this dynamic carefully, ensuring that the institution remained intact without alienating the next generation. The timing of this decision was also critical. Ascending to the throne brings both opportunity and vulnerability. Early actions set the tone for a reign. Every precedent established or reinforced sends a message about priorities, values, and expectations. Charles's choice regarding Archie and Lilibet was therefore not merely about two children. It was about asserting authority, establishing norms, and demonstrating the seriousness with which he would approach his responsibilities as king. The personal and political were inseparable. Yet beneath the calculated decision-making, there is also undeniable emotional irony. Charles's relationship with Harry has been strained at various points over the years. Decisions made decades earlier about upbringing, attention, or public duty have shaped the current dynamic. Now, as king, Charles finds himself making a choice that affects not just institutional continuity, but also his son's children, the very ones he would naturally wish to protect. The role of father and king intersect in ways that are both poignant and excruciatingly difficult. For Harry and Meghan, this intersection is deeply personal. From their perspective, the monarchy, represented by Charles, has the power to alter the future of their children. For Charles, the power to act is inseparable from responsibility. The tension between protection and enforcement, love and duty, is magnified by the knowledge that any action will be scrutinized, criticized, and remembered for years to come. Every decision is simultaneously legal, emotional, and symbolic. This impossible position also illuminates the broader challenges facing modern monarchy. In an age of transparency, social media, and public discourse, kings and queens are expected to balance tradition with modernity, authority with empathy, and institutional interests with personal relationships. Every move is a negotiation between past and present, expectation and reality, love and legacy. Charles's handling of Archie and Lilibet's place in succession is a microcosm of this larger struggle. A vivid illustration of the pressures and paradoxes inherent in ruling a centuries-old institution in the 21st century. And yet, even as Charles acted with caution, calculation, and deliberation, the emotional resonance of the decision was unavoidable. Publicly, it is framed as adherence to rules, precedent, and responsibility. Privately, it is a deeply human story of a father trying to reconcile duty with love, legacy with family, and authority with vulnerability. These tensions shape not only the immediate decision, but also the ongoing dynamics between the monarch, his children, and his grandchildren. The private consequences are perhaps the most profound. Every family dinner, every conversation, every interaction carries an undertone of negotiation, reflection, and emotional awareness. Harry and Meghan are acutely conscious of the subtle signals, the implications of language, and the weight of historical precedent. Charles, in turn, must navigate his roles without appearing overly harsh, distant, or punitive. This is a delicate balancing act, a dance of power, responsibility, and emotion that few outside the family can fully appreciate. And the ripple effects extend beyond the family. Public perception, parliamentary oversight, media narratives, and historical scrutiny all intersect at this moment, amplifying the stakes. Charles's decisions are interpreted as precedent-setting, values-defining, and image-shaping. Every choice carries implications not just for the present, but for the entire monarchy, its perception across the Commonwealth, and its future legitimacy. And so, King Charles's position is impossible. He must act as a father, as a king, and as a public figure, all at once. Every decision carries emotional weight, political consequence, and historical significance. Every action, or inaction, is scrutinized, debated, and remembered. And yet, even in this impossible balancing act, one truth remains. The next move, the private deliberations, and the hidden negotiations would set the stage for consequences that no one outside the palace walls could have predicted. For Archie and Lilibet, the world they were born into has always been extraordinary, yet incomprehensibly complex. From their very first breaths, they were enveloped in a life that the average child could scarcely imagine. Public fascination, historical legacy, and the constant presence of tradition. Every milestone, from birthdays to first steps, was observed, documented, and scrutinized by a global audience. And now, with the news that their place in the line of succession had been quietly removed or redefined, they had become the center of a storm they did not understand and could not control. Children rarely comprehend the intricacies of law, precedent, or institutional authority. They do, however, feel emotional undercurrents. They sense tension, perceive unease, and internalize the reactions of those they love. For Archie, even at his young age, the subtle shifts in family dynamics, the increased discussions about privacy and protection, and the emotional volatility surrounding his parents would have been palpable. Lilibet, the youngest, would absorb the atmosphere in ways invisible but no less significant, as children often register emotions long before they can articulate them. To be at the center of such a storm is profoundly unfair, yet it is the reality of royal life. Unlike ordinary children, whose challenges are contained within family and community, royal children are simultaneously heirs, symbols, and public figures. Every decision about their future, where they go to school, how they are represented publicly, and yes, even their position in succession, carries weight far beyond their age or understanding. The emotional consequences for them are largely invisible, but no less real. One of the most immediate effects is the loss of security. Not physical security, necessarily. Harry and Meghan have always been vigilant, but the emotional security that comes from knowing one's place in the family and institution. Children thrive on certainty. They need to know that their parents are protecting them, that their world is stable, and that the rules governing their lives are consistent. For Archie and Lilibet, those certainties have been disrupted. The line of succession, which should have been a fixed point of identity and continuity, has become fluid, contested, and uncertain. The psychological implications of this disruption are significant. Even if the children cannot articulate it, they will feel the tension. They will notice their parents' worry, the subtle anxiety in conversations, and the changes in routine or public exposure. These experiences, while normal in some families under stress, are amplified by the unique pressures of being born into royalty. The intensity of media attention, the unrelenting public scrutiny, and the weight of historical expectation create an environment where emotional resilience is tested constantly, and not on their terms. Harry and Meghan are acutely aware of these stakes. Their parental instinct drives every decision, from education to privacy to emotional support. They are determined to shield their children from unnecessary harm, yet they also understand that complete protection is impossible. The children's identities are entwined with public life. Their status, titles, and familial roles are part of a global narrative. In this sense, parenting becomes a negotiation between love and strategy, between shielding innocence and preparing them for realities they will inevitably face. Historical context adds another layer of complexity. Royal children have always navigated pressures unimaginable to the general public. From the upbringing of George VI's children during wartime to Elizabeth II's early years under public scrutiny, precedent shows that being royal is as much about resilience as privilege. Yet modern media, globalized scrutiny, and social media dynamics make the stakes exponentially higher today. Archie and Lilibet are not just heirs. They are living symbols in a digital age, where every image, every statement, every milestone is amplified and dissected in real time. This amplification brings both danger and opportunity. On one hand, it magnifies vulnerabilities, creating risks to privacy, identity, and emotional development. On the other hand, it offers unprecedented platforms for shaping narratives, influencing perceptions, and asserting agency. Though these platforms are controlled largely by adults, Harry and Meghan must navigate these dynamics, balancing the benefits of visibility with the need for protection, while recognizing that public interpretation will never fully align with their private reality. Consider the role of perception. To the world, Archie and Lilibet may seem like royal children, a title that carries glamour, privilege, and fascination. But perception masks nuance. The reality of their emotional and psychological experiences is far more layered. They are children growing up under conditions that demand extraordinary resilience, even as they navigate a family and institutional environment fraught with tension. Every interaction, every public appearance, every familial conversation carries weight. For the parents, this reality is heart-wrenching. Harry, who experienced firsthand the consequences of media intrusion and institutional pressure, understands that no amount of protection can fully insulate a child born into this world. Meghan, equally attuned to the dynamics of public scrutiny and systemic challenge, shares the burden of worry and decision-making. Together, they are navigating an emotional labyrinth, seeking to provide stability in an inherently unstable environment. The impact on identity is another critical dimension. Succession is not merely a ceremonial construct. It is tied to notions of belonging, heritage, and self-perception. For Archie and Lilibet, understanding, or eventually understanding, their altered position in the line of succession will inevitably shape their sense of self. The psychological effects may not manifest immediately, but they will reverberate through childhood and adolescence, influencing confidence, belonging, and familial relationships. Yet despite these pressures, there are protective measures in place. Harry and Meghan are deliberate in creating an environment that fosters emotional resilience, intellectual curiosity, and a sense of agency. They are cultivating spaces where the children can develop identities that are not solely defined by birthright or media narrative. Still, the tension between protection and exposure is ever present. The balance is delicate, precarious, and constantly shifting.